Hello and welcome to Tech Talk for the British Grand Prix. We've got some really interesting stuff coming up. Right, down here at the Sauber garage where I think we should start. We don't normally get to look at the cars at this time of the race weekend, but I thought we'd do something different, 75 years of Formula One and all of that. Well, you can just see out the front of Gabriele Bortoletto's garage here, the car's actually in a few pieces. If you come back towards me actually, you can see a really nice view of the Ferrari power unit installation in the back of the car. You can see the cake tins laid out in front of the garage. If you're wondering what those funny tripod things are outside the garage, you're going to see a lot of those today. That's the teams laser scanning the car just to be sure that they comply with the technical regulations. And you'll see all of the teams doing this to a greater or lesser extent. At this point of the race weekend, the teams haven't actually had to declare their upgrades to the FIA yet. So everybody's having a little spy on. Has anyone got anything new, any new bits and bobs? Down here at the Red Bull garage, I'm looking to try and understand the issues that the team are facing with essentially being a one-car team. Max Verstappen seems to be able to drive the RB21, but Yuki Tsunoda, in his car being prepared in the garage at the moment, is really struggling. Why is that? Well, it does appear that the RB21 is just a really sensitive car. And I saw a description from Alex Albon, who described it a bit like having the mouse pointer on your computer set to maximum sensitivity. Every tiny little movement you make has a massive impact, and it's almost unusable if you do that. Well, Max Verstappen essentially has his car set to maximum sensitivity, and it makes it really difficult for anybody else to use. Red Bull's challenge is to make the car work in a slightly wider window, so drivers like Tsunoda, Lawson and everybody else they're going to put behind the wheel of it can get the best out of it. Otherwise, they're going to really struggle in the Constructors' Championship in the second half of the season. Just having a look at the Haas of Ollie Behrman in the garage at the moment, and you can see that slightly unusual finish on the front and rear cake tins of the car, those brake cooling shrouds. I've not seen that before, and I don't think it's a travel part, so there's something that the Haas team is experimenting with. If you look across Esteban Ocon's garage, you'll see a bit of a comparison between the left front and the right front, which is not fully assembled. So the left front wheel is fully assembled with the cake tin in place. The right front, though, you can see is only partly assembled, and you can see some of the internal brake cooling arrangement on the front end of the Haas. Something that all teams are mucking about with, but it's just something we don't normally get to see. I saw a little clip from the premiere of the F1 movie recently, and Brad Pitt was asked what his real highlight of the 2025 season so far was, and he could have given anything, including the arrival of Sonny Hayes and the Apex team into competitive form in Formula One, but he didn't give that. He said how well Williams are doing in F1, and the Williams team have been a bit of a surprise this year for those who haven't been following too closely. That low drag car might not really suit the Silverstone circuit particularly well, but with Spa coming up, and if the weather's good at Spa, expect big things from the Williams team. And it's really nice to look at the car getting set up here. You can see the front bulkhead in good detail, the front brake cooling arrangements. All of this is normally covered up, but because we're here a little bit earlier than normal, we get to have a slightly closer look at some of the bits and pieces the team are putting on the car. And then we move along, and this is a great opportunity to see the difference between a car being built, Carlos Sainz in the number 55 car. Williams actually revised his seating position ahead of the Austrian Grand Prix last time out, just to make him a bit more comfortable in the car. But also, I believe, a little bit lower in the car to lower the centre of gravity, whereas Alex Albon seems quite happy in his car, and it's going quite well. Just a lovely little detail to pay attention to on the nose, though. The British Grand Prix, Williams home race. Look at the W on the nose in the British flag colours. Very nice little detail there for the Williams team. Well, we're back here in the studio to have a bit more of a think about what we saw in the pit lane, and also have a review of the footage, and also look at some of the documentation from the FIA. And it's pretty clear that there are some trends up and down the pit lane. About half the teams are using this race weekend to introduce new floors onto their cars. And the reason for that is that the floor's one of the biggest components you can put onto a Formula One car. And with the short commute from the factory to the pit lane at Silverstone, a lot of teams are taking advantage of that. And the team with the shortest commute into the track is, of course, Aston Martin. Their factory is literally just over the road from the main gates of the circuit, and Aston Martin, celebrating 100 years of the existence of that company, are introducing a new floor to try to find a bit more pace from that green Mercedes-powered car. They're only fitting it to Fernando Alonso's car initially, and they're going to assess how it performs, and then we might see it evolve onto Lance Stroll's car if it actually works. Another team that doesn't have very far to come is Red Bull Racing. They're based just down the road in Milton Keynes. We can see that they too have made some pretty big revisions to their floor. I think they're probably, as we were saying earlier, trying to make the car a bit more drivable. Max Verstappen hasn't been particularly happy this season, has he, with how the car's been evolving, and Yuki Tsunoda is finding it pretty much undrivable. But not all of the F1 teams who are based in the UK are in the immediate vicinity of Silverstone circuit. Some teams have to come in a little bit further from around the UK, and actually those commutes can take quite a long time. For example, not them. McLaren has also introduced a new floor, but it has to go all the way around the big London ring road, the M25, which is always thick with traffic and a bit of a pain to get around. But they too have introduced a new floor. But intriguingly, they've also introduced a new rear brake cooling package, and it's the inlet of the rear brakes that has changed this time. And that's sure to generate a bit of intrigue up and down the pit lane, and certainly on social media, as there's already been quite a lot of study, it's fair to say, on McLaren's rear brakes and how they're using those rear tyres and how they keep them stable for a race distance. So that's going to be a bit of a focus for a few people as well. But the team that I think that people need to be paying a little bit more attention to, who has also introduced a new floor, is Haas. Now, Haas has introduced a completely new side pod concept at the British Grand Prix. The Haas team is based in a number of different locations, the USA, the UK, and of course in Italy. But what I want to show you first with Haas is how their bodywork started out the season. Well, this is how it started out, and it wasn't great for Haas, but that's not the bit I wanted to show you. I'm going to bring this clip further forwards. A bit unfair to Haas, a bit brutal to show you their car braking, but here's the angle I wanted to show you. And what I want to draw your attention to are two parts of the car here. The shape of the main side pod duct, sort of an elongated triangle with blunted edges. That's kind of what you're expecting, kind of commonplace, kind of conventional side pod design. There is a protruding upper element on that side pod, but that's kind of common, and we're not going to talk about that too much. The other area of the car I want to draw your attention to is the rear view mirror. Now, these mirrors are fairly conventional in terms of recent Formula One design. Haas have got the drag reducing outer elements to the mirror support, with the main mirror housing in the middle of the support, linked by small elements up and down to that sort of C-shaped surround. What that does is, in theory, reduce the aerodynamic drag of the rear view mirror. It's a really clever piece of design, developed by someone at the University of Miami, published in a paper first explored by Ferrari, and I think Haas are just about the last team using it in Formula One. I say just about the last team using it in Formula One. Haas have actually abandoned that concept and switched to a conventional mirror housing. Here you can see it's far simpler, isn't it? They've got rid of that surrounding around the main mirror body, and that's a bit of a mystery to me, because previously all the teams swore by this approach. They all had surrounds around the mirror housing. They all said it reduced aerodynamic drag, yet one by one they've all reduced and removed those elements and gone back to these conventional mirror housings. Fascinating evolution of design. But what's really got my attention is what's going on down here. I'll show you a better shot of that in a minute. So now remember that elongated triangle of the car that was falling apart in pre-season testing. Now have a look at this angle of the car here. It's actually not the best angle to show you, but I want to draw the shape around the main side pod duct because it's been completely changed at Silverstone, and it's a lot more oblong in shape, rectangular if you want to be boring, but I like the word oblong, it's a good word. Underneath the main side pod duct though, the completely reshaped one, you've got this additional bulge in the bodywork, and within that bulge, it's hard to see, but there is an additional side pod duct that's just been introduced very quietly by the Haas team, and I think not too many people have noticed it. I'll show you another angle of it here. You can start to see the bulge quite clearly down there now, but what you can see this, what looks like a extension, a black stripe that runs through the middle of that bulge. I think a lot of people think that's just part of the livery. It's not. That's not a paint job. That is a cooling aperture. What it's cooling? Well, the team haven't told us yet, and they probably won't unless we look too hard. But when you look from the head-on angle at the side pod duct, you can see how much more oblong it is than that original shape. Obviously, you've got that protrusion along the top, which sort of changes the shape from this angle slightly. But you can see very clearly that additional, it's a sort of split aperture, isn't it? It's got a little cooling vein in the middle, that additional aperture in the lower segment of the side pod ducting. Now this sort of gives you a similar shape to, say, Ferrari, Red Bull, with that additional lower bit to the main side pod cooling entry, but this is a completely new approach from Haas, and the fact it's housed in that little extra bulge, well, that bulge isn't doing nothing. There's an aerodynamic factor with that. Exactly how it works? Well, give me a Haas and a wind tunnel and a few aerodynamicists and I'll tell you exactly how it works, but somehow I don't think Haas are going to let me do that, well, at least not yet. We'll come back to that one. I do think that this approach from Haas is pretty radical, and it's a big change for the team that a lot of people aren't talking about. And I brought this clip back up here just to do a little bit of a comparison, because we've got this very neat shape here, that conventional side pod shape. I've got it up there, I've highlighted it. Then we go to this and you can see this shape here, completely different, completely new, completely revised design from Haas. And they're not the only team in the pit lane who have a revised design, but one of the teams that had to travel almost further than any other team in the pit lane, with the exception, I think, of Ferrari, is the Sauber team, based in Switzerland, about to morph into Audi. Well, they've morphed some of the parts on their car, including, yep, you guessed it, a new floor. So maybe geographic factors weren't an element here, just they wanted to have a new floor on their car. And to explain a little bit more about why the Sauber team has done that, Anna Francis was down in the pit lane putting the questions to the team.
So we started with a new concept for the car in Spain, in Barcelona. Yeah, we brought a new floor, and that actually proved quite good change. As a matter of fact, we scored points every single race since then. It's given a much more drivable platform for the drivers. We brought another step in the same direction on the floor, and for this race we have another even step on that same direction. So it's basically, as I say, a new philosophy for the floor that has been developed further race by race. So what we call a new floor is just an evolution of that floor. That's for the floor. Then for the front wing, since Silverstone has a lower rear downforce than most other circuits, we're bringing a front wing that also provides lower downforces, just to match it so that they're balanced.
We've seen a few teams introducing new floors recently. Do you think there's a particular reason that that's been a sort of focus for a few teams?
It is, but I think it's a product of those regulations. The main part of the downforce in these cars comes from the floor. So you can understand that most teams are developing through that part of the car. You know, it is a crucial bit. We've been talking about cars being too low, using different skids. All the talk this year is about that floor being close to the ground and producing downforce.
Okay. So we're now obviously about halfway through the season. How much more development work do you expect to go on to this year's car before focus switches to next year?
It is a good question. No, it's quite tempting to say, oh, I found a new floor, let's just keep on developing this. But you need to weigh it against developing the 2026 car. So, as a matter of fact, we were not expecting to develop the car anymore until we found this big avenue. We're hoping that we believe this is the last evolution of the floor, but if in the next week or so the wind tunnel finds a bit more points, there might be another evolution this season. But I don't think much after that, because as you say, we're trading off time that should be spent on the 2026 car.
That's fascinating stuff. I'd like to hear that sort of detail from the teams. Well, one detail that caught my attention at the last Grand Prix, at the Austrian Grand Prix, was from Pierre Gasly's team radio down at the Alpine team. Now, Alpine hasn't bought any upgrades to Silverstone, but we did hear some pretty, well, clear radio messages from Gasly during the race. This one comes from lap 36. This is what the Frenchman had to say.
Turkey, something's broken, it's crazy. I don't know much more longer I can say on track.
Yeah, understood, mate. We're working on it. Okay, stick with it, please.
So clearly was something wrong with that Alpine. He did finish the race, but clearly was struggling with the car throughout the Grand Prix. Well, to find out exactly what was wrong with the Alpine, Anna was down in the pit lane and asked David Sanchez from the Alpine team exactly what had gone wrong.
Well, the observation on our side was very simple. On Sunday afternoon, we had a very extreme rear tire degradation. I think after the race, we found plenty of reasons why it happened. In a way, it's good we understood. We need to try and understand or anticipate a bit better on the Friday, but that's the plan going forward.
And there you have it. Once again, it's all down to the tyres. That contact patch defines everything else that the car does. It's in some ways the most important part of any racing car. And that's why this development from McLaren might be worth a few more tenths of a second than its very subtle design changes seem to suggest. And that's one of the glories of Formula One, isn't it? All those little details coming together to make a car much faster around a track. Join us soon here again on Tech Talk.